So I have friend of the channel, Shade Star, with us tonight, and we're gonna do something a little fun. But say hi to everybody, Shane. All zero people out there
Mhm.
watching us right
Hi,
now.
hi, everyone from Southern California.
Yeah. Okay. It's probably really nice out there right now. Okay, so we're gonna Shane and I have been sort of discussing doing sort of this polar testing event, so to speak, or maybe an experiment of sorts. Where what we're going to do is we're going to sort of crib off of my video that I posted probably at this point, maybe a month ago, that featured it was this video of Zendaya doing the Vanity Fair Proust questionnaire video, right? Where and if you haven't seen that video yet and you're watching this at a future date, go back and maybe pause this, go and watch the Zendaya video. So because we're going to be making references to it, and it would be probably a good idea to sort of know what we're talking about. So, but in a nutshell, so she was given this Proust questionnaire that Vanity Fair gives all these different celebrities, and the Proust questionnaire is sort of this old traditional set of questions that goes back to like the 1800s or so. And it's like 35 questions, and it's intended to sort of figure out what somebody's values are, what their sort of inner feelings are, thoughts. And to me, it's just a bunch of FI questions. It's asking you a bunch of stuff to evaluate, to use your FI to come up with a response and to evaluate the question. And Zendaya had a really hard time answering these questions, to the point to where I would argue she's probably bipolar. Um, and then you compare her to other celebrities that are probably not bipolar, and they're able to answer the exact same questions, but with much more ease. Okay, so in my mind, I think that these types of questions might be a good avenue if you're out there and you want to sort of try typing somebody or something, to use this as an FI polar test, And again, what we're trying to figure out is how frustrated does somebody get answering one FI question after another, right? And again, they could probably do it, but it's all about how frustrated you get. So what we did is both Shane and I independently asked, one of these AI generators to generate a list of questions that are similar to the Proust questions, but not the exact same things. So I have 10 questions. Shane has 10 questions. Neither of us have seen the other person's questions. So you'll be able to see our initial reaction to the question, and how frustrated or not frustrated we get having to answer it. Um, and instead of doing 30 and 35, we're just going to do 10. But I do have some questions sitting on the sideline. If we wanted to, we could do more, and we might actually do some of the Proust questions themselves, after we go through these new ones. Okay, so Shane, anything else you want to add? And then I want to wait until after we do all the questions to do all the theorizing and what we would expect, but I will point out that for those of you who don't know Shane or aren't familiar with him, he generally identifies, I guess, as an ISTJ, or at least that's how he was came out under Eric's system. But go watch his channel because he's got arguments for being different types in different systems. But for purposes of the way that I view the world, I'm going to assume he's an ISTJ. So for those of you keeping score at home of how an ISTJ would do with these questions, hopefully that helps. Okay, Shane, anything else to add?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how we both do with these and associating those with possible typings or being able to eliminate possible typings based on this, much like you did with Zenada. I thought that was a great video. If you're watching and haven't seen his video on that, please give it a look.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth your time.
Yeah. Well,
So,
she did all the work.
all
So,
right.
but
With that in mind,
and
we're
we'll
just
get into
good.
that afterwards. But I want to do the questions sort of quote unquote raw, and then we can do all the theorizing and explaining
Got it.
afterwards. Okay. So, do
All
you want to
right.
go first, or do you want me to go
Yeah.
first?
No, I'll go first with the asking.
Okay.
These were Gemini generated. Gemini is a program
Hmm.
on Google,
Yeah.
and I asked it to give me 10 psychological questions in nature based on the Proust questionnaire.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
it was spooky how quickly it came up with
Yeah.
these not,
Right.
um, I mean, very intricate questions, as you'll see. All right,
Yeah.
so let's just
All
jump
right.
into it. Number
Okay.
one. All right. What is the trait you most admire in yourself, and what psychological need does fulfilling this trait satisfy for you?
Okay. I think. Uh, I think I'll go with. Well, I'm trying to pick between one or the other. Um, I think as far as a trait, I would say sort of my ability to read people. Um, and if you've watched my videos, you'll see that just kind of throughout my life, I've sort of any sort of success that I can think of, or a lot of it just has to do with me understanding people and how to act, in different contexts around different people. Um, excuse me. So tell me this. Remind me of the second part of the question. The second.
What psychological need does fulfilling this trait satisfy for you?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think just you know, I honestly, like I was saying, I think the need that it satisfies is sort of the need to for achievement or to be successful. Um, as opposed to maybe just getting along with people. It's actually a need to be to achieve or to achieve a goal or to be successful. Okay, I'm going to try to not theorize so much and just give you an answer. It's hard for me to do that, but
That's
okay.
okay.
All right, go ahead.
All right, number two. What is the trait you most deplore in yourself, and what early experiences or insecurities might have contributed to this trait's development?
Deplore myself. I would say um, trait do I deplore in myself? Um, that's a very strong word, deplore, but um, I guess sort of like not being able to sort of get into new routines or do new things. Um, I have a hard time getting into doing new things. One thing I want to do, if it's okay with you, I kind of want to avoid that second part of the question where it's asking you to sort of elaborate and say, what
Right.
do you think it says about you? Just because when you go back and watch the Proust questions, they really just give you an answer, right?
Rapid fire,
Without sort of
yeah.
explaining the why. They just give you the answer and you just go with it. Okay, sorry.
All right. That's
Um,
okay. I'll
yeah,
shorten them.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Number three. What is the quality you most desire in a friend?
Humor.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Number four. What is your idea of perfect happiness?
Um, balance, having everything taken care of in a very balanced way.
All right. Number five. What would be your greatest misfortune?
Would be so I'm assuming it's asking like what could happen, not necessarily what something that did happen. Greatest misfortune, I think would well, geez, well, I guess like losing my career, like losing my reputation. I think. Yeah, go
All
ahead.
right. All right. What is your favorite occupation?
Oh, that's a good one. Architect.
Interesting. Okay. What is your favorite color? And what emotions or associations do you link with this color? I know
Blue.
that's more
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Kind of like a slate grayish blue, and I associate serenity, calmness with it.
nice. All right. What is your favorite flower and what symbolic meaning or personal memory does it have?
Okay. Flower. I don't even know what they're called. Lilacs? The white sort of bell looking flowers are those lilacs? Um, and I don't really have anything I associate it with directly. I just like them.
All right. Fair enough. Um, Number nine, what historical figure do you most admire?
Um, Lincoln. I got to go with the kind of the easy one, Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln.
Cool. All right. Last but not least, what is your motto?
um, Geez.
Maybe a longer question on this one will help. How does
Uh-huh.
it encapsulate your core beliefs
Oh,
about
yeah.
life,
Right.
human?
Well, I'll leave that to the audience to figure out. What is my motto? I guess one at a time, please, ladies. It's one of my favorite songs. Yeah, one at a time, please, is my motto, and I'll let
Love it.
the audience figure out, interpret it how they want to. Okay, well, that was cool. Um, so now let me, before we get into theorizing and explaining and everything, let me ask you my questions. And if it's okay with
Absolutely.
you, I do like sort of, just give me your response and we'll hold off like sort of explaining it or anything towards the end. But I get it. It's kind of an INFJ thing. Like we have to explain why we're saying things. So that was sort of telling. Okay. Anyways, here we go.
All right.
First question. And this was generated off of Grok. So different thing, but similar questions. Okay. What memory do you revisit the most often when you need comfort?
Wow. I can think of the ones I revisit that give me discomfort because those come up all the time. Just my resentments are many, unfortunately. But for comfort and memories, I usually try to stay in the immediate, not too distant of the past.
Oh,
I
okay.
I could go there, but I try to think of something that is attainable now. And
Okay.
I can't go back to being a little kid, so trying to think of that might give me more stress because oh, I can't go home again.
Right.
So I think of a memory in which I'm relaxed without stress, in a nice clean room watching a movie I really like and feeling like there's nothing pressing on me. And I have a number of those memories. And that's something that I can reproduce that I like that it is reproducible. A memory that I
Right.
cannot reach or reproduce is just going to be sad or stressful.
Okay. All right. Number two. If you could embody one quality in every action you take, what would it be?
Correctness.
Okay.
I like to do things right. Um,
Okay.
no do overs. I want to get it right the first time if possible.
Okay. Number three. What injustice stirs the strongest emotion in you?
Injustices where there's a certain way of doing things that are expected to be tolerated, and we have to just deal with it. I'll give you an example. Like in baseball, when an umpire routinely calls balls off the plate strikes, and it's just like everyone knows that so and so will call the inside. He'll call it a strike, even though it didn't clip the
Right.
corner. And you see games decided that way. I really don't like the idea of unfairness, and that can happen at work. It can happen with double standards with
Hmm.
housework at home. Um, when I see, I think double standards, that's the worst. Let's go with that. And
Okay.
that happens in sports too, because that same umpire will call it a ball when it's the other team with the exact same pitch. I
Okay.
hate double standards.
Okay. What is the most difficult sacrifice you've made for something you believe in?
I can think of two. One is all the bad sorts of fun I'm sacrificing to be a Catholic, a good one, and not just in name only.
Okay.
Um, and then the other is I really believe in the company I work for, um, its mission, the way it does things, the cleanliness and niceness of the facilities there. But the price I pay for that is working on the weekends, and it is definitely a sacrifice. And I often revisit and ask myself, is this really worth it? And then I take a look around at alternatives. I'm like, yep, it is worth it. I couldn't work at this other place. So,
Hmm.
um, and the same with the religion example. When I go back and think of the memories. It's easy to isolate only the good times, forgetting that the bad times that are intricately linked to those good times, it's part of the same event. It's just a different part of that event. And I think that's what we forget when we reminisce about our past.
Okay. Okay. Next question. If you could spend a day living someone else's life, whose would it be?
I would, I'm embarrassed by my answer, but I would like to live I'd like to live the life of a bishop or a priest
Mm,
or even the Pope for a day. That would
yeah.
be really cool to just experience that and experience the ambience physically, spiritually, in every way, and just realize this is what it's like,
Yeah.
because sometimes we feel so far from that it seems surreal, and I want to make the surreal tangible, and that would be one way to experience it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Next question. What fear have you overcome?
um I don't know that I've overcome any of my fears. I'm afraid of heights. I still am. I don't really like public gatherings and talking to a crowd of people. I don't like crowds of people. I don't like starting over on things, even though I've had to do that in my life many times. I'm
Hmm.
not a big fan of change in general, but here's what all those things have in common: as I get older, I'm better at all of them than I used to be. So I haven't completely got over any of my childhood fears. None of
Hmm.
them. They're all just as real as they used to be, but I can deal with them more in more healthy ways, and they don't cripple me. I can feel the fear and get things done anyway, and I'm proud of that.
Cool. Okay. Next question. What does it mean to you to live a meaningful life?
Well, this will be different for everyone, but um, I've made no secret on my channel and even here that I've although I've always been a theist, a believer in God, it was basically an intellectual belief only and not existential faith, which requires acting in accordance with your beliefs. So while my belief might have been just as strong as it is now on an intellectual basis in college or even post college, I didn't behave any different than someone else or myself without that belief. Now, um, actually living out the faith in a way that I think is required by my beliefs is something new for me and unique and interesting, and it gives my life and everything in it meaning.
Okay. Next question. What small act of kindness has stayed with you?
One that I've done for others, or
Oh,
one that
sorry.
someone's done with for me.
Either way, it actually says either given or received.
Um, I try not to think about it too much, but whenever I take some loose ones out of my wallet and give them to someone begging on the street, I think of the Bible verse about Jesus having the bad people on one side and the good people on the other, and he doesn't talk about any of the big great sins or wonderful things that we would expect. He says, "You fed me when I was hungry. You gave me water to drink when I was thirsty." And to the bad people, they didn't do that. So in a little secret existential way, I feel good. Like, yeah, there's a point. I did a good thing, and most of the time I don't tell anyone about it, but I'm telling everyone here. So that kind of takes away
You've
the
been waiting,
reward.
right?
But
Okay.
that
Yeah.
those things, they stay with me and remind me that even though I've done a lot of bad things in my life, I'm trying to do the right thing, especially now. And I don't think we ever really make up for those bad things, but at least I'm in the game. At least I'm trying, which
Hmm.
is, more than we can say for a lot of people.
Hmm. Okay. Next question. If you could create a tradition to pass down through generations, what would it be?
Prayer. I think we forget about the power of prayer. It works. Even for atheists, it works. When
Hmm.
someone's sick, you pray for them. When someone's halfway around the world and they don't even know you're praying for them, there's been studies, ironically, from an atheist state, the Soviet Union, where
Mm.
they showed that people's health actually spiked and got better through prayer, and they couldn't explain it. It was like magic or something. um, I think we forget about the relationship that we have to whatever we believe our creator, whoever we think our creator is. And it's like, if you actually believe in one, um, I'll call it an it, not a him or a her. You'll talk to it. Try to, if you say, "Well, I don't even know how," it's like, because you never try. It's like, "Well, I don't even know if God's there." It's like, well, it's just like any other friend. If someone I haven't talked to in 10 years, I don't know if they're still there either. But someone I
Mm.
talk to every day, I learn their voice. I learn how to speak with them. So yeah, I would say prayer is it's the first way to get spiritually connected, and it's the easiest thing to forget and leave off. So that would be the tradition.
Okay. Last question. What question do you wish someone would ask you? And how would you answer it?
Wow. Maybe ask me how I stay in such great shape. I love to talk about, the little routines and traditions I put in place for my life, as far as having nice, attractive, clean spaces in my car, in my living space, in my workspace. My clothes I always keep nice, and I try to take care of my body, and it makes me really happy when people do ask me about those things. Like, how do you do it? Because I can, it all starts, not to quote a famous person who will remain unnamed here, but it
Mhm.
all starts with making your bed.
Right, right.
Make your bed, and the rest follows. And it's those tangible physical things that, at least for people like myself, that's how to tap into your deeper, more spiritual life, or give it meaning, is start with the easy stuff, and then you'll find yourself doing the hard stuff easy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's it for my list of questions. I guess from procedural or process standpoint, you had mentioned that there are a few questions from the original Proust questionnaire that you wanted to raise. Um, so let's do that, and then after we do that, we can come back and do all the theorizing and explaining of what we
Got it.
just went through. Okay.
Yeah, I have how about if we do three?
Hmm.
I have more than that I'd like to ask you, but three for sure.
Okay.
Number one, what do you consider to be the most overrated virtue?
Oh, um, overrated virtue. I'm trying to think of what the virtues are. Do you know it? Can you rattle off what the virtues
Well,
are?
just any virtue. It could,
um,
and you're thinking of one that's overrated, like
yeah,
honesty, um,
yeah,
niceness, acts of kindness,
yeah.
um,
I
being
would
organized, working hard.
right. Overrated virtue. I would say, um, I have a really long thesis here, but whatever the virtue is of, um, what would the word be? It, I, it's not piety, but the concept or the idea of turning the other cheek,
Mhm.
of just sort of accepting whatever happens. Um, I think that would be one.
Right. Yeah, and I've been in that situation, and it's difficult, because when you don't turn the other cheek, figuratively,
Hmm.
you regret it. But then when you do turn the other cheek, you walk away feeling like, I should have done something. I should have said something.
Right.
And yeah,
Yeah. Well,
either way, it's
yeah,
difficult.
and I don't want to derail this conversation, but I have a whole thing on that. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. All right. The next one. Who's your hero of fiction?
Hero of fiction. Vito Corleone. Vito Corleone from The Godfather.
Fun. Can you say a word or two why?
Well, go watch my video on The Godfather. I think he was the master of um, FE, the master of establishing. You know, I mean, you have to remember he came from nothing, right? Other than maybe sort of a sense of family, and was able to come and sort of establish these, the institution of his family, his actual family, and then the institution of his sort of criminal organization family, right? The other family, and then his business and his reputation and everything. And he was able to sort of create that from scratch. And he did it by doing the quote unquote right thing, even though a lot of it was criminal activity. It was technically criminal activity, but in his world, it was sort of the right thing, right?
Right.
And and living by a code that is probably hundreds and hundreds of years old, that somehow he picked up when he was a kid living in Italy. And the idea of, like, if you live by these rules, everything will work out. And I think the whole point of the story of The Godfather is, like, sort of, the generation that lost track of those rules, right? So I'm
Right.
looking at my oranges on my counter as I talk
Mhm.
about The Godfather. So yeah, okay.
I have
Let's go to
one
the next
more.
question. Yeah,
It's related to the last one, but which historical figure do you most identify with?
that I identify with. Okay, so the last set of
Not
questions,
necessarily your favorite.
I went with Lincoln, but who do I identify with? I mean, how do you answer this without sounding like a total douchebag? But um, oof, I I think I think the person that I would let me see. God, this is a tough one. This is actually, it really is a tough one for me. Um, who do I identify with? I keep coming back to Mark Twain. Mark Twain, I think, is like, he didn't take himself too seriously, but he understood stuff. If I had to guess, he was probably a knowing type, either lead introverted intuitive or lead introverted sensing. He just had this sort of intuitive knowledge about the world, and um and what made sense and what didn't make sense, and was able to sort of, like, the reason his satire was so funny or right on was because it was, he was sort of getting at these, like, deep truths that, like, when you say them out loud, everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, yeah, totally right. you know
Yeah,
um
I'm thinking
so
one of his sayings myself. He
yeah.
says, if you want to be funny, tell the truth. It's the funniest thing in the world.
Right, and nobody's expecting it, right? um so yeah, and obviously, like I said, it's hard to just say, I identify with this person without sounding like you're totally full of yourself. But at least I didn't say Julius Caesar. So okay, so how about you? Let's. I don't have the questions in front of me, but I want to hear your responses to them. So go ahead and read the question and then answer.
Um, wait, oh, you mean give you another one?
No, read them to yourself and answer them yourself.
Oh, okay. The same ones I asked
Hmm.
you.
Yep.
Oh, wow. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right. Let me find the ones. Okay. What do I consider the most overrated virtue? I don't know how to explain it exactly, but there's a saying that says it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Mm.
And I hate the fact that that is a fact. I hate the idea that, no offense to any gender or stereotype or anything, but like there's some bimbo out there who can smile to the right people and impress the right people, and she's going to get promoted twice as fast as me and be like not just one, but two or three levels in front of me in a company.
Hmm.
And the knowledge and skill set isn't really there, but because they're put in that position, they end up getting what they need. Imagine a tournament where the winner legitimately does win the final, but if you've been paying attention, they should have lost in the semis. They should have lost it even way back there in the second round. But everyone looks, it's like, yeah, I think they won the final. They deserve to be champ. And it's like, no, they don't. And it kind of goes back to those injustices. There are people who just skate through life because everyone likes them. And to
Hmm.
me, it's overrated. And I know I sound bitter and sour. Maybe I'm just jealous
Well,
of it
I mean,
because I don't have that.
my response is hello, Fe Polar.
I don't know. I don't understand how it works.
Right.
You know, um,
Right.
uh,
Or the
you
value
know,
in it. Yeah. Well,
I
actually,
remember.
usually people kind of see a value in their polar function, but they just, don't do it. But anyways,
Well,
okay.
I mean, last example. I remember I was trying to make a surfing team, and they had a big tournament. 148 people were in it, and they said, we're taking like the top like 20, so you got to
Hmm.
make it to that. I won the whole contest and didn't make the team. And
Jesus.
and and like
Like you
these
won on
guys
like an
who
object.
lost,
Yeah.
yeah, these guys lost way early, and I saw like the guys in the company putting their arm around, oh, it's all right, bro. You're fine. Don't worry about it. And they made the team. And it's like I
Right.
destroyed him in that heat. How come they made it and I didn't? Like
Yeah.
like I was looking for, like technical results equals achievement, and life doesn't work like that.
No, it
And
does
and
not.
I hate it. So I think it's
Yeah.
overrated and I don't like it.
Okay.
Another one, who's my hero of fiction? I guess I have two of them. I like Iron Man because he starts off being a crazy, happy-go-lucky playboy who ends up sacrificing himself, in spite of having loved ones he wants to hang around for. It's the hero's journey, growth mindset. He goes from being a real jerk and unlikable human being to being the hero of the planet. So that would be one.
Hmm.
And one a little bit closer to home would probably be Hermione Granger because I
Oh,
see
really?
a lot of myself in her, like trying to be the best student, answer all
Yeah.
the questions, do everything right, overachiever, that whole thing.
Right. Gets
And
passed
in
over by,
and in
by
school,
the pretty
yeah,
girls.
yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
then, which historical figure do I most identify with? I guess I've been thinking about this one ever since you told me you're going to ask me my
Hmm.
same ones. But um, King David in the Bible is a historical figure, and he
That.
had a really good
Oh.
heart, but he did some awful things, and he embodies how one can be good and bad at the same time. And I think, what's in my heart versus some of the things I've done. And
Uh
um,
huh.
I identify a lot with him. And, far be it from me to identify with such a, religious,
Right.
great figure.
Literal
But
icon. Yeah. Right.
yeah, but I mean,
Have you
we're
seen
playing
the?
this game, so I'll take advantage of it.
Have you seen the?
The
I guess
House
it's,
of David,
yeah,
the TV show,
the
yes,
Amazon Prime. Yeah. I don't
I
know how
love
long it.
it.
Yeah, I just watched it maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. Um, I
Yeah.
don't know how long it's been out, but I really enjoyed it, and I didn't think I was because I have this very like, I mean, if we wanna get into it, and it actually sort of goes back to my answer about turning the other cheek, and this was actually more of what I was getting at, is that the story of David, always it sits with me the wrong, or it doesn't sit with me the right way. And there's actually a TED Talk from Malcolm Gladwell that, like, on this specific topic,
Oh, great
where
author.
yeah, and but the point is, and I'm not the only one making this point. I'm sort of stealing this from Gladwell, and I'm sure he stole it from somebody else. But the point of the story of David and Goliath, right? You usually think of it as like the underdog beating, the big champion. Um, when in fact it was just cheating. It was David just cheating. Like he literally like brought a slingshot to a sword fight. And if you watch Gladwell's talk, he's talking about how, like, they sort of sell it as like, oh, it's just sort of this wimpy slingshot. And the show actually does a good job of showing that no, these things are actual weapons. Like, this is something that
Right.
you would actually hunt with. And back in those times, there was this sort of code, and it goes back to my point about Corleone and there being a code. There was this code that if you had two armies that were about to, fight, you know, there was this understanding that you could take your best fighter and they take their best fighter and have them fight it out, and whoever wins the battle as long as you guys agree to it. So that way, neither side has to lose all these men, right? And so there was just this way of doing things. There was this code. And then David broke the code. David went down and cheated and took out their best fighter, not by fighting him the way he was supposed to, and the way that, one of the Israelites was supposed to do, but by cheating. And so if you can, I'll send you a link to the Gladwell speech after this,
Oh,
but
thanks.
it's a real interesting take. And so I always had this attitude, especially after seeing that, of like, fuck that guy. But I will say that the show made me think of him very differently, to the extent that it's like accurate, you
Well,
know?
we haven't seen the his bad side
Right.
yet,
Like, yeah, he hasn't even
so
really, yeah, become the king yet and stolen the girls and all that. But you
right,
see hints of it. You certainly see hints of it, which is
right.
interesting. So yeah, we should do it. Yeah, future we could talk about that. Sorry, we're diverting everybody. Let's get back to the FI stuff. I
Yeah.
wanted, I just
So
wanted to make that point about David was being a cheater. All right, so let's. Anything you want to finish up
well,
on with the questions before we get into our
yeah,
like explanation?
I would say again, we've given each other some FI questions, and I know that I would never mistake myself for a lead FI person, and maybe I
Hmm.
didn't do as well as I think I did, but I felt like I did well enough to know for a fact I will never ever um I'll, I could never see myself as a possible ESTP or ENTP, that's for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly
Like
not FI polar. Like, I mean, you were
yeah,
able to elaborate
guaranteed.
quite a bit. I
Yeah,
mean,
and I enjoyed it.
yeah.
Like it was fun.
Well,
Total
okay.
opposite of Zendaya.
Right. Right. Like there
Now
was
you,
zero frustration
yeah,
coming
you
from
on
you.
the other hand, you were able to come up with answers to everything, so that's good. That's also not polar,
Yeah.
but I really noticed you had to think a lot harder with
Yeah.
your answers
Yeah. I mean,
than
I
I
think
did.
if we just wanted to do this like objectively, and somebody develop a program that measures the amount of time between, the question being asked and the response given, you would blow me out of the water, right? Like, right after I asked the question, like, you had a response, like, immediately, as opposed to me, where, you could see I'm sort of searching in my mind, no, not that person, no, not that person, no, not that person. And for whatever reason, like you would come up with an answer and just go with it, right? Like I didn't get the sense that you were trying to evaluate, there's three choices here, or which one's the best one, you know. And so I have a lot to say about that. But I
Now,
think, go ahead.
I was going to say, I did notice upon reflection, not while it was happening, but I did notice that I, and I don't know what this means for typing, but I stayed away from particulars at times and gave general answers. And the
Sure.
general answers were easy, but instead of referencing a single particular instance, I forget the question that you were
Yeah.
asking me about. Well, like a favorite memory. I can think of like several favorites on the same level as one another,
Right. I
as
mean,
opposed to being
there
able to pinpoint one.
there is the issue that this is being broadcast out for anybody to see, right? And so there certainly were responses that came to me that was like, I probably shouldn't say that, because it's like giving away private info about myself that I just don't want out there or whatever. Um, so I will say that to some extent, my sort of thinking about it and deliberating um, might have just been like, do I really want to say that and put it out there?
Right.
But I also think that that might be indicative of somebody with front stack FI versus somebody with back stack FI, where somebody with front stack FI is just, they don't care. They'll just put it out there. They don't care that like 100 people are going to see this on YouTube or whatever. To them, it's their subjective truth. And if you don't agree with it, screw you, Like to me, that's front stack FI, no matter where it
Right.
is. Back stack FI is kind of like, well, I better think about this before I give my answer. Because the FE part is like, like trying to make sure that we're not rocking boats here, and we're not going to piss
Right.
off, anybody who may stumble across this video. So I think that that's telling as well. Um, so real quickly, I sort of want to get into sort of where FI falls in our respective function stack, and the way that I think about it. It's loosely based off of socionics and Eric's model and what he has to say about where things fall into different slots. But I'm certainly not talking for anybody. It's just kind of my opinion. Um, so you're third slot FI, right? ISTJ, front stack. And in my mind, I always think of the third slot as the gold star slot. Like no matter what is in your
Try hard.
yeah, whatever's in your third slot, like you're proud of it and you like to show it off, and it's kind
Yeah.
of like how how you, I don't know, to me, it's like how they call it the child function or whatever. To me, it really is like a little kid, like, hey, look at me, I'm doing FI, or in my case,
Yeah.
hey, look at me, I'm doing TI. Everybody give me a gold star. And it was interesting to hear you talk about how, not only did it come easy to you, but you enjoyed it, right? Like you enjoyed answering
Yeah.
these questions and putting it out there. And
I fell
you,
right into your analysis
yeah,
without even
yeah,
realizing it.
yeah. And I do think it's just third slot. And if we were doing, TI questions, I would be, I'd be all excited. Um, So I think there's something to that. And also just, not only would you just answer the questions, but there was a very natural way of sort of explaining sort of the underlying logic or structure of where you're coming from. Um, and well, let me back up and let me talk about where it falls in my slots, and we'll do sort of the compare and contrast. So for me, it's going to be the sixth slot. So it's on the backside, the quote unquote unconscious area. So that's why I have to sort of sit there and, you know, literally deliberate in my mind to come up with an answer. And I think of the sixth slot is being the quote unquote eye roll slot.
Critical parent. Yeah.
Yeah, and or it's sociopath. What is it called? Demonstrative something. I don't know. But to me, it's the thing where like you can do it, but you don't really like it or appreciate it or necessarily find all that much value in it. And when you find other people doing it or
You
see other
find
people doing
fault.
it, it's a little cringy, right? You're a
Yeah.
little like, really? Um, is it that big of a deal? And so for you, it would be TI would be your sixth slot. So if you see somebody sort of showing off how smart or
Yeah.
precise or pedantic they
I
are, that's very cringy to you, right?
Yeah, I have a good example of that. When I was doing the test with Eric and he was giving me the TI questions, I could answer them, but I
Mhm.
was annoyed about thinking about grandmothers, mothers, sisters. I
Right,
was just like, this is no fun. I can follow the logic. I could tell you that it's great granddaughter. I can tell, but
right. But you're
if
not
all mice
impressed.
play baseball and some baseball players like tobacco, do all mice like tobacco? It's like, no, not necessarily. Some of
And see,
them
that's so funny that
necessarily,
you say
not
that
all. I could do it.
because
I
I
could do
love
it, but
that
it's
stuff.
like, yeah, it's like work for me. Like
Yeah,
it's like taking out the trash. Taking out the
really.
trash isn't hard, but it's not fun. It's just like, okay, I got to do this thing.
That's really funny. That's so I mean, yeah, so we have a very interesting pairing in that respect of, your 3rd slot is my 6th slot and vice versa. And, and so I love the TI stuff. Whenever I watch a typing video, like, I can't wait for the TI questions because I like playing along, right? And even, like, studying for the LSAT, that you take for law school, there's all these logic games, and I would just sit and do those over and over again. And I would like, it's the kind of thing that I do for fun. Like, I buy those little logic puzzle books on planes and
Right.
do
You
them.
know,
And, because it's that child thing.
right. Now,
And
I
so
I would like to mention on the GRE, which is the humanities
yeah,
version of the else, I
yeah.
scored higher on the logic than I did on the English or the math.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, yeah, so I
Yeah.
know I can do it.
Yeah.
However, again, I didn't enjoy it necessarily. I was getting tired of
That's
doing
so
them
funny.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess, it would be sort of comparable for me doing FI stuff of kind of like, yeah, I can tell you my
You
opinion,
could
but
do it.
really, what does it matter? That kind of thing. Um,
Right.
because, yeah, like, I'm kind of thinking of like a work setting or something where I could just be like, yeah, I can tell you my opinion about the food in the cafeteria or, the smell in the bathroom or whatever, but what good is it going to do? So, so it's kind of the same attitude of like, I could do it, but what's the point? And so that's really funny that we had that response. And so with these questions, the other thing that I liked to point out about Zendaya, and I was doing my best to avoid doing this just so that I don't like fall into sort of what I would predict and look at me. But I couldn't help myself from doing it. And that is trying to justify your answer. So for example, Abel, when you asked about, which historical person do you admire the most, there's a list of 3 or 4 people that I was going through. And like a lot of it really was kind of like, what's the most acceptable answer? Like an answer that I could give that everybody would be like, yeah, that's a good answer. And
Mhm.
and of course Zendaya was doing that, and to me it's sort of like when you're front stack TI, back stack FI, TI is all about trying to find an objective answer that the universe agrees on, right? Um, and of course that's very different than what a lot of people describe TI as. A lot of people describe TI as like your own subjective thoughts, and I don't think of it that way at all. I think of it as like actual. valid logic, right? And so it's universally and objectively true, right? As long as the premises are true and you're doing the logic correctly, right?
Right.
And so when I'm deliberating about what historical figure should I pick, I'm trying to like there's this part of me that wants to give you an objective, acceptable answer. Like we could all agree that Abe Lincoln is, because if I was just like, Attila the Hun, right? That that would raise some eyebrows, right? And a front stack FE person is not going to do that, even if they really think that that Attila the Hun is like the most admirable historical figure. So yeah, okay. So that was the other thing I wanted to point out, and I think if somebody goes back and watches my responses, because I can certainly remember doing this. You'll see me sort of trying to, is that a right answer? Is that a good answer? Where if you compare it to you don't care. Like you don't care if
Yeah.
if I say it's a good answer or not. It's your answer, right? From
Yeah.
an FI perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It felt like being in a bubble. I'm just curious how a lead FI or someone with FI creative
Yeah.
would be different from us, or overlap would be. I
Well,
imagine.
go ahead.
Go ahead. I
No,
was
no.
just gonna
Finish
say
your thought.
lead FIs I think would be more. um I don't know how to say opinionated, but I think if you're really a lead I think you'd have a very strong, like a moral argument along with your favorites. Like this is my favorite, and here's why the it could be no other way than this.
Yeah.
Like even,
Well, I mean, again, I see where you're coming from,
or
but
maybe that's the weak
but
I don't
yeah,
know. You
yeah. I
tell
mean, I
me.
think that's more of somebody who doesn't have strong FI sort of latches onto that. I mean, to me, like I'm thinking of it like an INFP or an ISFP. Like I'm thinking my daughter's an ISFP, and I'm kind of thinking of her doing this, and I have friends that are INFPs, and I think they would do it more in the vein that like Dan Levy did it. If you watch his video, where they just give you an answer and that's the answer. And like they don't have to elaborate on it, they don't have to explain
No.
it, they don't
Wow.
have to like it's just that's the like you're at like almost as simple as like me pointing to my shirt and saying what color is this, and you give me an answer.
Right.
Like to you
Oh,
it's
okay.
like it's that obvious to you, right? Now it's not, or to somebody who's lead FI, right? And with Dan Levy, like it was so obvious, like the answers came so quickly to him and so obviously to him. Really, the only sort of mental work I could see is he was trying to be funny, right? So he had a little bit of that innie that he was, putting in there, trying to come up with a funny response, not necessarily a correct response, but something that would, get you to giggle a little. Um, but it was very sincere, right? It was very quick, and it was just like again, it's just like if I asked you what color my shirt is or what color your shirt is, that's just what it is. And again, I'm not trying to say that they think it's objectively true that everybody should agree with them. Like I think somebody who's lead FI, if they said, historical figure I admire the most, Cleopatra, I don't think they expect everybody to say Cleopatra as if that's the universally objectively true answer. But in their mind, there's no doubt that it's Cleopatra for them. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a distinction between their favorite versus um the crowd favorite, or
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
And I mean, when you talk to some, I don't know how many people you interact with that are lead FI, But it
Not
really
many.
is this. It's just this sort of unforgiving. I think is the best way to describe it. It's just unforgiving certainty in in what they believe.
So
And they're
what
not hemming and hawing about what the correct answer is or anything. It's just like,
right.
this is my favorite
So
band,
so
period.
that rigid black and white trying to objectify something subjective, that's probably more indicative of inferior FI.
Yeah, or I mean, it could be third slot. Yeah, like I could imagine you would be more likely to get into like an ethics or value argument, so to speak, where you have an FI opinion about something and somebody else has like the counteracting FI opinion, right? And never the twain shall meet. And I can imagine somebody with third slot or fourth slot might be more, or even second slot, really, to be honest, is more likely to sort of get into a quote unquote argument about it. Where first slot FI users, I think they just they're just like, well, this is my FI, and like I understand FI so much that I understand that your FI is different than mine. And not only that, but they kind of take pride in the fact that that their response is totally different than everybody else's, you know? Like they're not trying to convince you that Cleopatra is the best choice. In fact, they're trying, they would almost like take pride in the fact that they were the only one out of 20 people to say Cleopatra, you know,
Right.
because to them, it's showing how authentic they are, right? Because
Right. I could see that.
if everybody said Cleopatra, then they would be pissed, right?
Right.
Because you're not because then they're just like everybody's just being fake and being a poser. So I think of like the ISFPs, like the Kurt Cobains, the real sort of just like sort of grumpy artists, that everything has to be authentic, and they hate posers, they hate people that are inauthentic, they hate corporate bullshit, they hate the fake stuff, all that, and really, everything's got to be pure, not pure, but authentic, right? So that's just my take. And I certainly see it in my ISFP daughter. you know.
Right.
So,
Cool.
um, what else? What else? Was there anything else that we were trying to tackle?
Um, yeah, just um picking, just really nitpicking here. How do you think second slot FI would answer these questions
I don't
opposed to
know.
first or third?
I don't know. That's a
Because
good question. Yeah.
that's a tough one. I think I mean, it would depend on the individual a lot, but I imagine they would be comfortable with the answers
Yeah. I
and
mean, so you're either going to have an ESFP or an ENFP, right?
right.
Um, and if you think of second slot as, again, the tool function that you're using to um, service your dominant function, then let's take an ESFP, for example. So their dominant function is SE, and they have FE. And it's, I mean, just answering these questions, I could see them kind of being annoyed if there's no immediate reward or point for doing it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if this was some sort of competition, like, perfect example. Let's say this is like Family Feud, right? And they were asked these questions that are sort of FI questions, but they're trying to figure out like what's the most common, or something like that, where there's sort of a gamesmanship to it. And then they would enjoy it, and they'd probably be pretty good at it. And they would give you like their correct answer. But I just think that it's got to be tied to the SE part, right? But if they're just sort of sitting here and somebody's just feeding them questions, then
They'll be bored.
they'll be bored. Yeah, I think they'd
Yeah.
be bored. And they'd answer the question, and yeah, okay. But that's just my take. I don't really know, but that's
Yeah.
kind of how I would read it. And ENFP, I think, would be a little different, where they would see it as an opportunity to convince you. that, that their FE stuff is right, like with that NE stuff, or like as an opportunity to change your mind, right? And to convince you that, Cleopatra is,
Yeah, you're
was a
right.
badass chick and everybody
That and
should,
that goes
you
with
know,
tool function.
yeah,
ESFPs would want it to be towards some goal. ENFPs would see
right,
it as a gateway to discuss those things in depth. It'd be like, hey, we're going on the next question. No, no, this is more interesting than the next
right,
question. Let's really break this down. Why do you think it's that? I think this
right.
is way better. And then
Yeah, I mean, they
they'd
would get lost in
really
their
get
NE
into it.
land. Yeah, they
Yeah.
would take it as an
Okay.
opportunity to sort of explore any world given this FI response that they're giving you. Um, which is a little different from yours, where you weren't really trying to convince me, of
Right.
that I should agree with you or anything, so much as just trying to. It's not really showing off, but just trying to
Share.
share, to give a robust answer, because to you it's an important like each of these things was an important thing, and
Yeah,
you're sharing its importance with you. Where second function is more like, it literally is like you're being more opportunistic with it, and you're literally using it as a tool for another goal, like,
absolutely.
so, yeah. um
Interesting.
so for example, I think if you went and looked at Spike Lee's response, Spike Lee's probably an ESFP or an ENFP, my guess. Because he came across, like, his FI came across as second in tool, because he was trying to impart a lesson, you know, on you. If you go back and watch his responses, a lot of his responses were sort of like little lessons.
Teachable
Yeah,
moments.
yeah, right. Like, I feel this way, and here's why, and the world would be a better place if we all felt this way. Um, as opposed to Dan Levy, where it was more personal. Like, again, he kind of just understood, this is my response. I don't expect anybody else to give you the same response. I'm going to try to make it a little funny, just because we're all here and I'm a funny guy. But, I'm going to be authentic, and I'm going to give you a real response. Spike Lee, on the other hand, he was giving you a good response. He could do it quickly. You could tell it was front stack, but it was sort of like trying to teach you a little lesson, kind of thing. Um, I don't know if that's the right way of articulating it, but that's just how I think of it. In the same way that I think of like ENFJs, where introverted intuition is their second function, and they're constantly trying to give you these little tidbits of sage wisdom,
Mhm.
that are a little bit eye rolly, or cringy sometimes, but they're using their NI as a tool for their FE,
Right.
because they're trying to get everybody to like them or get on board with
Yeah.
their,
Um,
whatever they're
I
selling.
noticed that with ENTJs also,
Yeah, yeah.
trying to give you this like advice, unsolicited advice
Yeah.
all the
Yes, the
time.
kings of
They're the
unsolicited advice, right?
yeah, for
ENFJs and
sure.
ENT. If you watch, what's her name, Dear Kristen, that does sort of the like, I don't know if you've ever watched her, but she does these little funny video vignettes where she plays all the different characters, and they're all different MBTI types, and then they're just in different sort of funny situations. And with her ENFJ and ENTJ, they really are always just sort of giving unsolicited advice. It's really funny. Okay. So, yeah, what time is it? Yeah, it's about 9:35. We got on, I think, probably long enough. I'm happy to revisit this, but
Yeah, for sure.
there's always, a ton to talk about. But I think for purposes of this, we're probably good. Oh,
Yeah.
we have a comment. So the Chris, turning the other cheek. It's almost a form of the paradox of tolerance. Yeah. You had a critic from friend of the program, Isaac, who I am tormenting. He he and I are going through this back and forth in the comments section of another video, and I realize that I like totally look psychotic, but I invite everybody to go look at that because he's got a point, and we're going back and forth on that. But it's all in good faith, and good back and forth. Um, Anyways, anything more on FI or the Proust videos? Again, I invite everybody, go watch those. I mean, even the ones that I didn't put in my video, just go to Vanity Fair's site because it really is fascinating when you think of it through the FI lens. So,
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get somehow have an FE version of this. I'd like to see how that
yeah,
would go.
FE's tough. I mean, yeah, I don't even know if you could ask questions like this. FE's really tough polar. Um, I mean, I don't think Eric even thinks he has a very reliable. It's
Right.
almost just like he just has to test around it, you know. Um, but finding FE polar, I mean, I have some thoughts on it, but it's tough, and really, if you really wanted to be scientific about all this stuff and test I can imagine you could give these questions and then hook somebody up to a galvanic skin conductor thing, right? Where it like tracks your blood pressure or your galvanic skin response, right? So if you're
Right.
frustrated, it starts beeping, and you can tell how frustrated or non-frustrated somebody is, right? Um, and so you really could get like super like Dario Nardi scientific about it if you wanted with the FI stuff. FE, I don't know. We'll have to put our heads together and see if we can
Yeah.
find something that's good FE polar. Because it's one of those things where it's like you know it when you see it, but it's really and a slight preview because I'm doing these polar videos, and I'm trying to find examples of just like somebody clearly polar in some function or another, and I've been trying to find FE polar types without being mean, right?
Well,
And
that you
the
had a good one. That one with the guy and his stepdaughter's friend or whoever it was. He was the tool builder, and she came in there um, and asked him what the problem was.
Oh, the movie. Yeah, the movie clip.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that was a good
yeah,
one.
yeah, I'm trying to find, like, a real world example of, because that was just acting, right? But I do think that was pretty telling from a literary perspective, of showing that, he's very TE competent, but then as soon as you go into FE world, he's just, a mess and doesn't know how to respond. I thought that was brilliant writing. Not that I think that they were, had any of this in mind, but like I say, the universe has a way of showing itself, right?
Right,
E-
and I
e-
I
you know,
related to him a lot. Just
yeah, right,
like I'll find myself in a situation with someone, and I'm like asking myself, how do we get here? I had
right,
good faith. I don't want to be in a fight with this person. Like, what did I do wrong? I don't get it.
yeah,
And I really don't know. And it's just that mysterious, just the way people relate to each other is
yeah.
just kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, his was somewhat interesting because I don't know if you watched the show or know the show, but it was basically like, and without spoiling it, like he just couldn't tell this other person something, and it was getting in between them. Like if he was able to tell her, here's what happened, they would be able to get over their sort of internal problem, but he couldn't tell her, so it was just making it worse and worse. So, but anyways, but it was a good
Before,
example. But the
bef-
thing is the people that I think I've identified, and I'm trying to find a good example, are the people who go to the pickup artist classes where they're trying to learn how to be pickup artists, totally FE polar, right? Where they're like, they're trying to learn. Do you know what the pickup artist community is? It was like a big thing like 10, 20 years ago,
No.
where it's like these guys fancy themselves as like Casanovas, where they go out and they just try to pick up random girls at bars, right? And it was like this whole movement, and it was a bunch of like ENFJs or ENFPs or somebody, probably ENFJs, who were very good at social interaction, teaching classes to a bunch of guys who had like no skills whatsoever, right? And so, but they would teach them like little TE type of plan things, like, first you go up and you do this, and then you do this, and if she says this, you say that. If she says that, you say this, right? And so it was like this whole TE kind of flow chart kind of thing. And then they would just go out and like practice, and and obviously hilarity ensues. Um, because it just didn't come natural to them. They're just trying to follow this program. And to me, that just screams FE polar, right? And not only FE polar, but trying to use a TE process to fill in an FE hole, right? So once I find a good example or two, watch for that.
Cool.
But all right.
All right. Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Nice
We
talking
do
to
have some
you.
comment. Yeah, good
Yeah.
talking to you. We do have some comments. I don't know where we're going here. I apologize. I have a really hard time reading this. My eyes are bad. Yeah, I might just have to come back and address these left.
We're so opposite. Funny.
Yang, yang. Yeah,
I
the
feel like
coloring of the
we
side of the
we
video.
go
Yeah.
well together, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, we
But
have
what do
that
I know?
that 6 slot thing going on, which is funny. Okay. All right. Well, I'll try to address the comments. Sorry, I'm not used
Yeah.
to getting so many comments. Um, yeah, I agree. The pickup artist stuff is definitely FE polar. Yeah. So either FE polar or FE inferior, and it's just hilarious. And you should watch it, from an FE polar perspective, and you'll see what I
Yeah,
mean.
I would
I don't think you're as
enjoy
bad as
that.
these guys. You've got some years behind you, that you've learned your
Yeah, and
lessons. But
I
these
I
guys are like all in their 20s and they just don't have a clue. It's
right.
so funny. But okay.
All right then. Well, great talk,
Yeah,
and
good talking
I
to
look
you.
forward to doing it again
Yeah,
sometime
we'll do
soon.
House of David. I got plenty to say about House of David. So maybe
Great.
dust that off and we could
Some of
do
those
some.
other characters too
Yeah.
in it.
Cool.
All
All
right.
right. Well, good
We'll
night,
see you
everybody.
soon.
All right. See you guys. Bye.